Hi everybody and welcome to a special One Stiletto in the Grave. This came about because I was staying with Sunny this weekend and she happened to be dashing off to the Archers studio to record a topical insert, and it was just so fascinating that we thought people might like to know about it. So hiya Sunny, and
Hi.
Tell us, what is a topical insert?
Well, a topical insert is basically a scene which is rewritten. We always record, about a month ahead of time. So if something happens, like an air crash or something major in our world, then if it's at all possible, the Archers will try and rewrite a scene in order to incorporate that information. So because the Queen had died on Thursday, sadly, it was decided that we would take a scene that had already been recorded about a month ago and rewrite it with that information in. So that's a topical insert basically. And I was asked on Friday if I would be available to do the topical insert with Carol, who plays Linda. And it was a scene, it was actually rewritten completely for the episode, but Carol and I were already in that episode, if you see what I mean. So it was a new scene. And I was asked if I could go in over the weekend and do it, mainly Sunday, but unfortunately I was already opening a fete in Warwickshire, so there was a lot of phone calls and emails to see if I could extricate myself from it, and of course you came also to that fete, didn't you?
I did.
And they were very good about it. They were absolutely lovely, and so I was able to open the fete, and I know that they were concerned about whether they should go ahead with this particular event. There was much chat about it, but because the proceeds of the fete always went to the church and the community centre, they felt that would, in the spirit of maybe what the Queen would have wanted, and it would have caused an awful lot of problems if they had to cancel everything basically, and they hadn't been able to do this for 3 years because of COVID, etc. So after great sort of scratchings of head, they decided to go ahead with it. So that's what I was doing. So I opened the fete at something like 12:30 and then rushed in the car to Birmingham to do the topical insert, which was a scene. So we finished, I think, the scene at about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then it went out that evening. And it was a scene that was written by Katie Hims, who'd actually written the whole episode anyway. Beautifully written, I think. It was always tricky, I think, trying to get the tone of these things right. But we've had a lot of lovely response from various people about it, and those who are important people at the BBC are very pleased with it as well. So it's great, and I thought it was a beautifully written scene. It's trying to find the right sentiment, isn't it? As much as you can for what people are feeling.
I thought it was beautifully written, and presumably the writer had very little time in which to do it. So
absolutely.
She would have been asked to do it at short notice.
Absolutely.
And would she have known at that point, because she would have to find out which character she was going to be writing for. So somebody in the Archer's office was presumably ringing around to see who they could get in for her to write the scene for.
Absolutely. So, availabilities. And yes, I was rung, I think it was first thing on Friday morning or something like that.
Right.
And other actors were being availed to see if they were on. Some people were available, some people weren't. So I'm not sure how long it took to find out who was available and who they were going to use, because there was all a bit of toing and froing as well with me, wondering whether I could extricate myself, from opening this fete. So, I mean, there were a good few hours before Katie would have known exactly who she was going to, be writing for. So, yes, she had to do it very, very quickly, because, of course, it wasn't announced, was it, until about 6:30 on Thursday that the Queen had died. So it was quite late. So there wasn't time that night for the Archers, obviously, to write a scene for that episode that went out. There certainly wasn't enough time. And I think then it was decided that the episode that was going out on Friday might not have been the appropriate one anyway, and if they could have got the actual episode written or the scene written. So I think it was that was, we were the characters that were already in the episode and of an age which would be appropriate for that scene, really.
And presumably the other constraint that the writer had is that the editor, I guess, sort of clipped out a scene that was already there to make space for it, but she would have had to write something that took exactly the same amount of time as the scene that went out.
Absolutely. Either bits would be edited out of existing scenes to make it work, make the time work, or scenes would have been completely taken out or rewritten. And I'm afraid I don't have that episode anymore to hand, so I can't tell you what happened. But yes, absolutely. So there was a lot of editing. So when we finished at maybe 3:30, because it was actually Jeremy who directed us in the episode, our editor, and then he then went off to the editing channel to look at the whole episode to see what he could chop out and nip out, rewrite, and, well, not rewrite because we'd already written the scene, but it was edit it, nip it out, so that we had the right length of programme to go out then at 7 o'clock that night.
Crikey, so that's quite a deadline, isn't it?
It's quite a deadline.
For you to finish kind of a bit before 4, and then he's got less than 3 hours really to get the whole thing sorted.
To turn it right. I mean, the great thing is you can do that in the Archers. It's more difficult if it's I don't know, EastEnders or Coronation Street or something like that, because you've got so many people that you've got to get back in. You've got cameramen. There's a lot of money involved. Whereas with radio, you can do it because it's a question of getting back to studio, finding your actors, and so it's a slightly easier exercise. Tricky, of course, but it is slightly easier exercise, and that's why the Archers is sort of famous for being able to do these topical inserts. I mean, I do remember one many, many years ago that I did when Tiger Matt was in the programme, and we happened to have recorded a scene where he was actually down in London. It was all pre-recorded, and then we had those awful bus bombings. Do you remember the awful bus bombings?
I do very well.
So this was the natural scene for them to take out to re-record, and I'm sure it was with June. I think I had to do it with June Spencer, who played Peggy. But I do remember us being terribly late with it. I mean, I think we were still recording at sort of like 5:30 at night, and the thing went out at 7. So it was even later, but they managed to get it out anyway. So.
And it's so important to get the right tone, isn't it? It's not just doing it, it's sort of just getting something done and banging it out at 7 o'clock and saying job done, because lots of people will have been listening to that and will have been saying, have they got this right? Is this the right tone? Is this have they caught the moment, really? Which I thought the writing did brilliantly, and that you and Carol did brilliantly, and your performances. It was quite a short scene, wasn't it? But
it was to the point.
But very. I think it was the first time that I'd felt emotional about the whole thing of the Queen dying, actually. But I did get a little lump in my throat as I sat in your living room and listened to it with you.
That's very interesting, isn't it? And yes, because we were, weren't we? We thought, oh, I wonder what it's going to sound like. I'd literally done it a couple of hours before, and it was lovely to hear it. And I think it wasn't difficult for Carol and I to find that emotion there, because I think, as you say, I think we were feeling it. It's just although we knew that she was in her great years, and it wasn't that long that she was going to be around, but it was still a bit of a shock, I think, particularly because literally a couple of days before she'd welcomed Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister. So it was that juxtaposition, I think, of suddenly 1 minute she was there and the next minute she wasn't, and hearing on the news, people saying that literally the weekend before, she was having lunch and she was very bright and alert. So it's as much that as anything else. But of course it's the greater grief, isn't it, of the communal grief that everybody feels. It's the shock of it as well. And
yes, she was so very visible a couple of days before, wasn't she? And it does go like that sometimes. My beloved dad, had a very, very, very happy last day when he did everything that he normally did. He was out and about, talking to people, chatting, laughing, and then he died. So it does, and it is, however old someone is, and my dad was very elderly when he died, it's still a shock. It's not a surprise, but it's a shock, because when someone has been very visibly active, you kind of expect there to be more of a gradual decline, I suppose.
Yeah, you do, don't you? And I think that the words that Katie, who wrote that particular scene, used were clever. You know, the inspiration. She was inspirational. That was one of Carol's. She was inspirational, and I think that, you know, particularly because when she came to the throne, women, you know, were not that present, were they, in public life? I mean, it was quite something, and I think she was an inspiration to a lot of women. There were possibilities, weren't there, for women? Women were still sort of had limits to what they could do, but I think she gave a lot of women the idea that maybe there was choice somewhere, and there were possibilities.
Yeah. I think you're right. There was a very interesting article in The Guardian, I can't remember who wrote it, I'm afraid, just pointing out that at the time that she acceded to the throne, women couldn't get a mortgage in their own right. You couldn't get a diaphragm fitted unless you had a wedding certificate, your marriage certificate. You had very little agency as a woman in the early 50s, and this is the, you know, we were both born like a year after the coronation, weren't we? So
Absolutely.
This is very much of our lifetime, and what women can do now. Well, you know, the last thing that she did was to appoint a woman prime minister.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and how things have moved on. And I mean, I also think people admired her very much for her personality. I mean, I think, yes, she was our queen, but I think it was some of the qualities that she had. I mean, she was steadfast, wasn't she? She was devoted. And she wasn't born to be queen, was she? I mean, it was perchance because her uncle decided to abdicate, and the whole family had to take on this mantle. And the only way that she was going to get out of it was by abdicating herself. But no, you know, whereas a lot of us have choice about things. I mean, I know life can deal us all sorts of things, but she didn't have much choice. She took that mantle on. And I think, you know, a great love for the country, great love for the people. And everyone that you hear who spoke to her, who had more intimate conversations with her, said she was just so attentive. You know, she cared very much about people. And you forgot that she was the queen. You know, she was able to really communicate with people, and felt very deeply, you know, for the country. But I mean, she saw so much, didn't she? You know, the decades that she was the queen, so much has happened since. I mean, and that's so interesting what you're saying, you know, about what women could and couldn't do then, you know. Yeah. So she was a great there. And it's very interesting, isn't it, the outpouring of grief, that there is, and it's almost like people feel connected to her personally as well. But I suppose it's because it's marked by the different experiences in their life. She's always been there, hasn't she?
Yeah, I think she's a very interesting woman, because to some extent it seems to me she subsumed her own personality and became somebody that, you know, she didn't talk about what she felt about anything, did she? And people projected things onto her, which is why she became very beloved, I think. And it's fascinating. I was thinking today as I was driving off somewhere that we learn all those lists of dates of kings and queens, don't we? And for our grandkids, she'll be another one in that list of dates. And and they will know King Charles for however long he lives. Interesting times. I find the pageantry and the history absolutely fascinating. It's God knows who's the person who has the big book that has all these instructions in about what you do when this happens, but clearly it's a very big book, and they are able to sort of swing things into place very, very rapidly, because
very quickly.
I mean, I'm in London and you can't get a hotel room for love nor money, apparently. But you know, the arrangements for so many people to pour into London, all these heads of state as well who are going to be arriving, who've been told to get the bus. I think not.
I know.
I think they're probably not getting the X26 from Heathrow as I would, but yes. I expect it's some sort of Ponzi bus.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's a lot to do. I mean, God, goodness knows, Sonny, you and I have arranged funerals, haven't we, for our friends and our loved ones and our family, and it's a very difficult thing to do in a very short period of time. When it's not a public thing, neither of us have had to organise that, but to organise something like this.
Wow. It's huge, isn't it? And, even down to the toilets that they're going to need. I was listening to Radio 4 on the way in, and those little things that you don't even think about. But of course, they've been planning all this, haven't they, for years and years and years. It's all down there, as you say. It's in a great big book, and also the security. King Charles was in Northern Ireland today, and I was really interested watching the security men around him, and whether there was a very tall chap behind him, they're almost sort of cocooned. It's very interesting, the whole thing, watching it. And also apparently, the Queen had been laid to rest in the church in Edinburgh, and only for 24 hours, and 24,000 people had already passed the coffin, and I think they're expecting something like 440,000 in London. There'll be millions more people, but to be able to get them through, and they'd like to get more through. It's the whole logistics of it. It's just absolutely extraordinary, isn't it?
It is. Well done for playing your part.
Well, thank you very much.
In this whole strange period of time, because, huge congratulations to you, to Carol, to Jeremy, to Katie for writing it, and for everybody else in the Archer's office who was involved, including all the people who were doing all the phone calls, trying to set it up in the first place, because, that was a huge job for somebody. It was. A huge amount of work, but it was terrific. So well done, you.
It was. Well, thank you very much. And I just wanted to thank the good people of Pebworth for allowing me. Yes. It was Pebworth Fate for allowing me to leave when I did, although I did manage to open the Fate. Yes, but they totally understood, and obviously, and I just felt privileged and honoured to be part of it in the Archers, and I will keep that script forever. Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. If you'd like to see behind-the-scenes clips and bonus content, please visit our Facebook page, One Stiletto in the Grave podcast. And if you'd like to ask any questions, follow us on Twitter at OneStiletto65. This podcast is produced by Raggedy House Productions, and the music composed by Tom Smith. See you next time!